My name is Keshav Jain. I'm in the industry for last 12 years. I currently working on a SIEM platform that's a security operations center. So we build SOC services for our customers. I basically use technologies, the Microsoft technologies like Azure Sentinel, Defender for Microsoft, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud, and many other Azure specific security tools. And we set up the security monitoring for our customer. So here I thought of talking on a concept which is evolving, the zero trust. I mean, when you hear to the leadership or when you hear to CISOs, they always talk about the concept zero trust. So my intention is to make you all familiar what exactly is the zero trust and how it can solve the security problems, right? So we know, right, like we are adopting the digital transformation, right? Whenever we go to the conferences or when we hear to some leaderships or a CEO forum, everyone wants to adopt the digital transformation, right? And the digital transformation comes with a good cost, right? Because when you propose the solution of digital transformation to your organization, they will look into the budget. And once the budget is approved, you will be implementing the digital transformation, you will be implementing the cloud, AI, ML, right? And if a small cyber attack happens on the solution that you built in, right, it's going to cost you a lot. Apart from the money, it can bring down the reputation of the organization, right? Nowadays, any attack happens, next day you will see it in the LinkedIn or even in the newspaper that the customer data is not secure. And when we read about this customer data, right, that is a very important thing. People say data is the new oil, data is the new currency, right? Customer data is extremely important and extremely precious. And if any attack happens, those attack has a tendency of kind of stealing the customer data, and then it will go back to the black web, and you know what things happen after that, right? So like in last couple of days, we learned about many technologies, AI, ML, DevOps, SecOps, many technologies. And I'm sure like most of you are going back and will be building solutions on those all technologies. And I also want to wish you a good luck, best of luck, right? And the intention of this best of luck is, let's keep your application secure as well. Because if it is a secure, then your luck will be with you, right? Obviously the performance will be there, but along with the performance, security is also something which which application should have, right? So quick disclaimer, I mean, this disclaimer is like a movie kind of a disclaimer that you always read it before the start of the movie, but I just want to clear a few things because we will be talking about a lot of concepts. So views are my own. Whatever the learning I gather, it's just by visiting the Microsoft platform and reading the blogs, right? I'm not going to talk about any client-specific security or the organizational security. And we will be talking about a lot of examples, right? Most of the example may not fit in your real-time scenario, right? So you have to take decision according to your, I mean, whatever knowledge you build with this session or with other stuff, because security is also about applying a lot of principles and ISOs, right? So, okay, let's start the session. So I talked about the attacks, right? So this is some data, I just gathered it from the internet. So you can see, right, how the attacks are happening. Even like in the COVID era or after the COVID era, this hybrid culture is coming up. People wants to work from anywhere. We have a new concept called BYOD, bring your own devices into the organization. We have vendors, contractors, they are bringing their laptops into the organization, right? Most of you are on the, at this moment, most of you are on the hotel Wi-Fi, right? And we might be trying to access our application, right? I mean, this network is secure, but you can imagine, right? There could be a possibility that if this network become unsecure, some virus or something happens, or any threat actor finds a vector to penetrate this network, then it can cause your company a lot. So with the help of the zero trust principle, there is one thing that always comes up with the zero trust is never trust, always verify, right? Okay, before we go deep into the session, just one last disclaimer, like we are going to talk about the conceptual thing, architectural thing, what exactly the zero trust. Intention is to make you all aware of this technology so that like when you do your development, deployment, we can kind of mix this thing into your deployment or the development, whatever you are doing. We are not gonna talk about any specific tools. I mean, although I will name some tools, but will not talk about those tools in general, right? So never trust, always verify. But then, like the business leader says that business runs on the trust. So zero trust is not about trusting or untrusting the people. It's about the endpoint, the identities which are inside the network or which are outside the network. It's about we don't trust them by a default, right? Because things can, I mean, I give you an example, right? We are working from this hotel, we are connected to the Wi-Fi. If we implement a default kind of a trust, so it could be something you are inside the VPN, the perimeter-based security, you are in the perimeter, and then you have access to all the application. And if some attack happens, then it can easily find out a way and go, impact your organization. So we are talking about the never trust, always verify. So whenever you are making access to the application or to the data, your identity will be verified based on certain predefined parameter. It could be the machine, the device you are using. Is it a compliant device? Is it a non-compliant device? Is it a mobile? Or from where exactly you are trying to access the application, or at what time of the day you are trying to access the application. It could be something that you're trying to access the application during the midnight, right? And it could be something that's not the usual time when you generally work, right? So there are a lot of factors on which your access will be first verified. When you first try to make the communication with the application, your things will be verified. Once it is kind of a clear, we get a green signal, then the access will be granted. And once the access is granted, the second thing will come up about the least privileges. And the third thing is assume the breach. Yes, we have to assume the breach. Breach will definitely happen. If it happens, then we have to minimize the blast radius. We have to minimize the impact of that breach whenever it happens, right? So we have seen that castle and moat approach, right? In that approach, castle is surrounded by a lake or a pond, right? So whosoever crosses that pond, then he can enter the castle and then he can visit anything, right? So now that kind of approach is not enough, right? The perimeter-based security approach is not enough. We have to build a kind of a verification at every level. If you don't have access, like if you're not the authorized person to the application, then it should not appear on your desktop. Or if you are accessing any remote desktop, then that application, if you don't have, if you're not the right person, then you should also not have the visibility over that application, right? So zero trust is also not a kind of a silver bullet or kind of a software that kind of you buy it and you add it in your portfolio and then everything will be kind of everything inside your network becomes secure. No, we have to build a zero trust, and that will be built with many tools. We have to implement it on the principle of never trust, always verify, right? So why we need a zero trust, right? We want to prevent the lateral movement. These are the security specific term, lateral movement. Whenever the attack happens, it try to impact other things also. So we call it as a lateral movement. We want to not give the implicit trust, because trust is a very, very dangerous thing if it is a implicit, right? Then it's like we are, I mean, every day the adversaries are coming up. Every day we are seeing the news of the, I mean, if any adversary comes and it impact, then it's going to kind of downgrade the reputation of the company, the customer trust, everything go for a toss, right? So, as I said, like this simply works on the principle called verify explicitly. Whenever you try to log in, I mean, what generally happens is like every time when a user or a device or an application try to make a new connection to the application, that connection attempt will be authenticated and will be authorized, right? Based on the data point. Data points can be the location, the kind of a device, the device health, or could be the anomalies, right? Which can impact the things. And the least principle is something like, if you, I mean, you just need a reader access, right? Then you should only have a reader access, you should not have the contributor access. Generally, like when we develop a code or when we kind of do a deployment, sometimes we ask for a bigger access, right? Even I do a deployment of some technologies, right? So sometimes I need a administrator kind of a right? So from the beginning only, like we assume, okay, let's ask for the administrator right. At some point of time we might have to do certain deployment, right? So these kind of a mindset should be avoided. Should we always go with the principle of least privilege, because once if your account is hacked, then you should have a limited access, right? This way we can kind of minimize the attack. And how we can kind of work on the third thing is assume breach. So if breach happens, then what are the monitoring things we have implemented, right? We have a monitoring tools, what kind of use cases we have implemented, because with the problem with the monitoring tool is like you can build many use cases, you can build lot of analytical rules, right? And that will generate the incident. But if you keep generating the incident for irrelevant thing also, then what will happen is people just create a folder in the mailbox and they will set up a rule and all the mails will go in that kind of a folder. Because when we get an alert, then it should be a meaningful attack. It should be the meaningful kind of alert, right? So simply verify explicitly is the first thing that comes with the zero trust. Second is the use least privilege access. So the minimal access will be granted. And the third is the assume breach. If breach happens, then what are the things which we can do, and what are the kind of how we can minimize the blast radius, right? Now, what are the approaches we can take while working on that zero trust, right? We have to treat every network as unsecure, whether it's our own network or it's obviously the outside network are not secure, right? So we have to treat them, and we have to implement the measures with which we can kind of protect the resources inside the network, right? And the access is simply given based on the like what is the role of the user, right? The HR should not have the access over the applications which are meant for the engineering team, and the engineering team should not have the access to the HR data, right? We should know how is our network is implemented, right? How the network is laid down, right? We have to implement the policies, and we have to do a certain kind of monitoring as well as the detections, right? So these are certain kind of approaches generally we do. Now, when we talk about the zero trust, it has a pillars, like these are the things which are kind of related to the zero trust. The very important and the essential thing is the identities. I mean, as I said again, like we have to validate the user authentication, right? Then we have the devices. With this hybrid culture, everyone kind of like when you have the contract workers, they will bring their own devices, and devices is not only about your laptops. It can be the IoT device, it can be your mobile, it can be smart watch as well. I mean, it's not. I was just reading certain articles. The new vector, the threat. I mean, threat actor is someone who performs the attack, and the vector is the path through which they enter the network. These are some terminology. So it's very easy to find out this vector using these smart watches, right? Sometime we use an old version of the smart watches, and they are connected to the mobile, and sometime we connect it to the work machine as well, right? So these are certain kind of things which are the pillars of the zero trust. So we will talk about, I'll talk about each and every pillar in a detail. So the very important pillar, that's a identity. So identity can be the human identity or the new non-human identity. Identity can be of a user, identity can be of a devices, right? So we have to protect these all things. The basic thing, the basic identity principle is username and the password. But that is not enough now, right? We should have the multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, right? Like after putting up the password, the verification can happen using over the phone or over these devices. The FIDO keys are coming, a lot of keys are coming. You can do the validation with the help of those all keys, right? And then can be the authenticator app in the mobile. So we should have the proper authentication in the place, right? So when an initial attempt to access is made, like we need to verify with the strong authentication, ensure from wherever the access is coming, it should be the compliant access, should be the should come very clearly. It should not be something that you are making access from impacted devices, right? So these are the kind of things which are related to the identity. So in nutshell, right user and the right entity have the right access to the right resources at the right time. 5 R's of this identity is the right user and the right entities should have the right access to the right resources at the right time, right? From the Azure point of view, from the tools which Microsoft provides, we have this tool called Azure AD. That's an IAM tool, identity and access management tool. With the help of that tool, we can properly set up the IAM, and we can kind of secure our identities, right? Now, the important principle with the identity is also like your on-premises, not simply rely on the on-premises identity. It should be integrated with the Azure AD, with the cloud-based identity as well. It should not be like we are still running on those domain controller and validating all the access from there. No, we should, if we want to achieve the principle of the zero trust, we should have the proper authentication like multi-factor authentication. Along with that, we should have these all integration of our on-premises identities as well as the on-premises identity with the cloud identities, right? Now the endpoint. So endpoint is like we all know what exactly the endpoint. So endpoint is something like your devices, your mobile devices, right? And actually we talk a lot about the diversities, right? So actually the endpoint is the thing where we actually follow the diversities, right? People will come up with their own kind of a laptop, or they have iPhones. Earlier we used to have some Windows phones, or we have Android phones, we have tabs and many things, right? So this is actual place where people will follow the diversity, and we don't know like how diverse is our devices, right? So when we have this kind of a diverse kind of a device in our infrastructure, then the the security should be in the place, right? So how we can make those all devices? So generally from the security or the compliance point of view, we use a tool called Microsoft Intune, the endpoint manager, right? If you have worked on any deployment kind of a project there we use this tool, and we enroll the devices. And once your device is enrolled, then it will try to find out what all are the things which are not compliant as per the Intune policies which we have deployed. So we try to first make these all devices compliant, right? And the product that can help us in doing this, there could be many products, right? But the product which can help us in implementing the security of the endpoints, we have the endpoint manager, we have the Intune, we have Microsoft Defender for the endpoint. That's I mean the best tool which we use it as a EDR tool, right? And obviously, like, everyone should implement the BitLocker also. Because in worst case, if something happens, if you lose your laptop, then the BitLocker is the something that can protect your data on the machine. So we talked about the identities, we talked about the endpoints, right? About the devices, because whatever the access will go into the system, that will be, obviously it will go from the endpoint, right? It will go from the devices, right? Here we have something called the surface area, right? So the surface area is something, I mean the system within the organization which is very susceptible. We feel like if attack happens, then the threat actor will try to enter the organization from those all surface area. So we call a concept called reduction of the surface area, like attack surface area reduction, right? So that's the principle we work upon in the endpoints, right? At some, like, along with this compliant thing, we should also have a proper monitoring setup. So as I said, like, I am part of the SIEM team, so we deploy the Sentinel for checking the signals and the things which are coming. So we have different type of logs coming up from the Azure AD, and then we set up a correlation between those signals with the signals which we are getting it from the devices, right? And based on that, we do the identification of the alerts or incidents, right? So now we have the third important thing called application. The third pillar of the zero trust is the applications, right? So applications are kind of an interface. I mean the interface through which actually the data will be consumed, right? And when we talk about the applications, there is something called shadow IT. Anyone knows what is shadow IT? Okay, so in short, shadow IT is something, the applications which are not managed or governed by our organization. It could be the drop boxes, or it could be some freeware application which we simply download. Obviously, we all know, like, these shadow IT brings the, I mean, it can increase the performance, or it can be increase the individual utilization, right? Because let's say you want to send certain files, and there is a lot of policies in your organization. You cannot, I mean, you have to follow some principles while sharing those all files, and you don't have those compliant tools. So the easy way what people do is they download the tools and then they upload it and then they share it. It's just a very simple example. Actually, shadow IT is not only about the sharing the application, it's about the entire applications which are not governed by the organization, right? And shadow IT is, I mean, you cannot completely bring down the shadow IT. It will be there, but how we can reduce the impact of the shadow IT? So that comes into the application, right? And then we have the tools called Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, right? These tools can help you in managing the kind of how the applications are accessed, right? How we can prevent the sensitive data, and I mean, how we can gain the visibility inside the applications, right? So the another important thing is the network. So network is something, okay, we talked about the identity. Identity is something you are accessing the application, right? Access will go from the computer, but ultimately it will travel over the network, right? If we follow the principle like stop the attack at the source, as soon as something enters your network, if we prevent it at that particular point, then we can definitely reduce the cyber threats to your organization, right? So here what we can do is like we have lot of tools. Networking is a platform on which we will have lot of Azure provides lot of tools like Azure networking. We have NSGs, application security groups, DDoS protections, VPN, express router, lot of things. Along with the safety, we also have to bring up the productivities also. I mean, it should not be that you keep implementing the secure thing and if somebody want to access application, that is increasing the latencies, right? So along with that, I mean, we have to kind of like network segmentation should be there. Network segmentation can help us in reducing the blast radius. If attack happens and if we have a proper network segmentation, then only that particular area of the network will be impacted, not the entire network, right? Now, data is the most important things, right? Data is the new oil, data is the new currency. Everyone keeps saying that, but what are the measures we are putting up for protecting your data? I mean, if somebody steals my currency or my oil, then obviously I will be in a big time trouble. So data is something which we have to protect, and data is at the core of the zero trust, right? So I mean, in the school days, we have learned the definition of the data. Any meaningful information is known as a data, right? But what are the things which we are doing to protect the data, right? So the important thing about the data is like, we should first know where actually is our data, right? Is it in the, where exactly it is stored and whether it is labeled. We have to do a proper labeling of the data. I mean, we cannot set restriction over the entire data. Some amount of data which is not PII is not that sensitive, right? So we have to do the proper labeling of the data. We data encryption should be there, like if the data is in a transit mode or if data is in a rest mode, right? Everything has to be protected, and whatever the data, decisions we are making for accessing the data should be encrypted, right? So from the product point of view, here for the protection of the data, we have this Azure Information Protection, AIP, and the unified labeling. We have the data loss preventions, with the help of which you can do the data labeling, right? And then we have the Defender for Cloud Apps as well, MCAS, we can use it here as well, right? Infrastructure. So when you read about the zero trust, somebody may not say the infrastructure is a part of the pillar of the zero trust. They consider that the identity, endpoints, data, network, and applications are part of the 5 core pillar of the zero trust. But infrastructure is also a very important thing, right? So we say like versioning, the proper versioning of the software. We cannot rely on the older version of the software, right? Like obviously the older version have their own vulnerability inside it. That's the reason we keep applying the security patches, right? So when we talk about the infrastructure, the proper configuration management should be there. We should have JIT, just in information or just enough access privileges principle used, right? And from every stage we will be collecting the telemetry, right? So telemetry should also be collected, right? And wherever we see any risky thing or we feel like this could be the path, then it should be taken care immediately, right? Okay, so just a minute. So I talked about the principle of the zero trust. Now, lot often, like when we talk about this principle of zero trust, when you do a Google search or a Bing search, you'll always see this concept comes in called SASE. That's called Secure Access Service Edge, right? So zero trust is some kind of a architecture or a principle, and SASE is something is a framework through which you can kind of take at least a step towards the towards the zero trust. I mean, SASE is not something that you implement the SASE, then the complete zero trust will be implemented. So I thought of talking about the SASE as well because it's somewhat related with the zero trust, right? So SASE is something, a combination of two type of services. One is the networking services. Second one is the security services. So in the SASE, what we do is we try to protect we try to implement the security concept at the edge of the network, right? So I mean, in the traditional VPN kind of a scenario, when you make an access towards the application, if you have a SaaS application in your infrastructure like a Workday or Office 365 or anything, ServiceNow, right? Your access will first go to the data center, the validation will happen there, and then the request will travel the network, right? So what we try to do is with the SASE, we implement the combination of the networking services and the security services. So in the SASE, it's actually a combination of a different type of tools. So in the SASE, it's like from the networking services, we implement the SD-WAN, and from the security services, we have the tools like the Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA, we have the software web gateway, we have the CASB policies, right? So when you read about the SASE, like there are a lot of vendors available for the SASEs, right? Some will give you the 5 services, some may give you 10 services, some may give you even more number of services. So a lot of vendors are there like Zscaler, Netscope, lot of, I mean, more than 10-20 vendors are available, and everyone comes with their own definition of the SASE. So I'm just presenting what Gartner has defined as a SASE. It's a combination of the networking services and the security services, right? So in the SASE, as I said, like we will have these kind of tools. These are the minimum kind of tools which can be used to implement the SASE, like the SD-WAN. So you know, like it's a wide area, software-defined wide area network where that can help you in kind of gaining the faster connectivities, right? Then we have this firewall as a services. So as I said, like SASE is more about the cloud. So we cannot have the physical hardware. So here we use the firewall as a services. We have the ZTNA. So ZTNA is not something you implement the ZTNA and then you will gain the zero trust, right? It's just the one component that can help you in building the zero trust, right? So it's about ZTNA is a tool that actually manages your access towards the application, right? In a very nutshell, I mean a very layman kind of a language, with the help of ZTNA, what happens is like when you try to make access to the application, if you're not a authorized user to the application, then you may not be able to see that application. So that's a layman definition of the ZTNA, but once you read more about it, I mean, you can gain a clear definition about it, right? Then we have the software web gateway, right? To make use of a lot of internet specific things, right? I mean, when we try to access the internet over the unsecure transport, then this SWG helps, right? Then we have the CASB policies. These are the cloud access security broker policies that kind of control the flow of the data, right? So these are the things I actually wanted to talk about it. As I said, the intention is not about talking about any product and the tool. Intention was to talk about the principle of the zero trust, so that like when we develop an application, we should implement, or when we plan the security of of our entire organization, then we should implement the zero trust. And zero trust is not something like you start working on it and within a 1 month or a 1 week you can deploy. It's a continuous process, right? There are a lot of things involved, lot of phases involved in the zero trust, right? So I simply picked up the quotes from the CEO, from the Satya's quote, and the only intention is that it's this concept is gaining the popularity. It's a buzzword, right? Within I can bet on this, like in coming 1 year, 60 to 70% of CEO, like when they speak, they will also talk about in the keynotes, they will talk about this concept, zero trust. So what, like Satya has mentioned in one of the conference, right? We spent many years in implementing the zero trust approach, and then we are trying to implement these in our product as well, right? So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about, the principle of zero trust and how it can be achieved. So I hope like you guys enjoyed the session. Thanks everyone.